everyone. We're working on a podcast about how tough it is to buy a car right now. From dealers charging thousands over sticker price to used cars selling close, if not over, the price people paid for them brand new. It's a wild time to be car shopping, and we'd love to hear from you. Text or email a video to TalkingCars@iCloud.com and tell us about your experience about buying a new or used car recently. That's TalkingCars@iCloud.com. Thanks, and on with the show.
Hey, welcome back. I'm Keith Barry.
I'm Kelly Funkhauser.
And I'm John Lincove.
And this week we've got kind of a controversial vehicle we're talking about. This is BMW's iX. It's their first sort of purpose-built all-electric SUV. It looks like nothing else out there. John, what's the deal with this vehicle? I'm putting you on the spot here. You spent the most time with it.
It's very Seinfeld-esque. I mean, what's the deal, right? So first of all, it's one of the first. It's not the first because BMW came out with the 4 Series, which has their new grille, which is a throwback to the early BMW nose with the twin kidneys. So they're very tall, elongated, narrow twin kidneys. As Kelly pointed out in the conversation, they're not really a grille. They're just kind of tacked on because there's no radiator in an electric vehicle. So they don't need to actually be functional. So they're not really a grille. The iX is much more of an SUV than a kind of a crossover raised hatchback or anything like that. The version that we rented from BMW is the iX xDrive 50 with 21-inch wheels. That's what the Monroney says. And it's $83,200. It will just, we'll get right to the point. This is an expensive vehicle to start. It went up to $96,000 with options. So it's a very nice vehicle, but it should really be that nice at that price. 5-seater, hatchback, all-wheel drive. That's the basics of what it is.
Personally, I actually really like that BMW has done something completely different with it. I think what they're doing is really appealing to folks who, BMW as a car company, it's not 1991 anymore. The E30, this is the 2002 is this is the past. And for better or for worse, BMW has to do what it has to do to stay relevant. And electrification is relevant, and design here is relevant. Ours had that rose gold trim. So this is kind of BMW's new, like a halo car. It's a car that makes people look at the brand and kind of defines it, right?
So yeah, it certainly is a halo. I mean, right now it's their EV halo. Look, people know in the past they had the i3, which is a little, almost like a scaled down version of this car, but it had a gasoline engine that would act as a generator if you wanted to go, a range extender, they call it. They had the i8, which is a very futuristic looking sports car. This is as mainstream so far as BMW is going with their EVs. It's a weird thing. Talking about it for the story that we're going to write about the first drive. Some people said, it's the next progression from an X3. I don't know. It's price wise, it's not a progression from an X3. Size wise, it may be, but it's like a loaded XM50, X5, 50M because of the price. But it is roomy. It is big. I mean, my kids actually, they often want to sit in the front seat. And Emily Matthews, Jen Stockberger don't listen, but, often let them do that. But they are tall kids. And anyway, they wanted to sit in the back of this. It was very roomy. It was comfortable. They have plenty of plugs for their devices. Driving it was, really enjoyable. It's another one of those vehicles, much like some of the ones we've talked about in the past, the Kia EV6 and the Hyundai Ioniq 5, that you really have to go into the manual and the systems and the controls really to understand all the different features that are available, which I know Kelly's going to talk about a lot of that. But it's very interesting. It's not the BMW of old with knife-edged handling, but it certainly is quick. I mean, it's a lot of power there, a lot of electric power, a lot of instantaneous power. So it was very cool to try out.
Yeah, it's definitely a statement car. And at that price point, it kind of better be. And Keith, you stole my line, but yes, if I am a target demographic as a millennial, then the rose gold was right in line for that. I thought it was very pretty. My neighbor though is BMW all day, all night. And he was unsure of what he thought about the design and look of it. You called it kidney beans. They almost look like beaver teeth to me. It's a statement, that's for sure. So pick your animal. But I thought that it was very, luxurious and nicely finished. The fit and finish was very nice. And I loved how quiet it was. That's what really made it feel luxury to me. I've been in all of the EVs. And when there's no other noise to drown out the wind noise and the road noise, it kind of sounds loud, but man, they did a really good job in this one of dampening all of those sounds. There was next to no wind noise. And it was, finally almost a luxurious experience, especially coming from a Tesla. And I had just been in the Mach-E earlier in the day. Those are kind of noisy wind noise cars. And so this was really nice. It felt quality.
Now, Kelly, you're our expert here on user experience and on the advanced driving systems. Let's walk us through the interior, and then maybe we'll talk a bit about some of the steering itself and braking and accelerating.
Yeah, so I think most people think a few steps forward is put everything into a touchscreen. That's not necessarily always the best way to do it, and unfortunately, some of the controls fell victim to everything being in a touchscreen, especially in this car. You really have to take time and set up all of the personalization and learn this system when you first get into the car. You're going to spend a good chunk of time to do that. After you do that, most tasks that you're doing frequently become easier and you'll get used to them, unless it's climate. I think every single person that got in that car was just completely frustrated with the climate system. There's essentially an endless row of controls that you have to swipe the screen to get to them. You can't even customize, what is there. There were some symbols that were like, who has any idea what this is? And myself and another auto engineer were sitting in the car for probably 15 minutes to figure out that the one symbol was for the heated armrests. And so it's just a lot of learning. Not everything is better in a touch screen, but I understand that, for this aesthetic that they're really going for in this car, like I said, the rose gold and the, everything new luxury, the touch screen makes sense. But you're going to have to put in the time.
I'm going to sound like a Luddite here, but I something that's kind of annoyed me in BMWs in general, and it's a default setting. I know you can change it, but it's that the radio and a lot of the things in the interior of the vehicle stay on. The HVAC, the radio stay on even after you are getting out of the car. So most newer cars, either everything will shut off when you press the power button. Some cars don't even have a power button, but everything will shut off when you open the door. This car, I've got Hall & Oates blasting and I'm halfway to the grocery store. And,
No one wants to hear
just...
that.
And and your BMW neighbor who still loves his E30, I'm sure.
Keith's a 50-year-old at heart. Let's be honest.
I'm getting close to being
you're spot on. Everyone has a hard time turning off BMWs, whether they're electric or not. It's just like a thing that's still annoying. I know actually several times with the, start stop of the engine, some people have gone out to the parking lot and, someone will have parked a BMW and then all of a sudden it's running and it's because they thought that it was off and you can't ever turn them off. So yeah, it's almost a joke, but even
it's not just an electric
shifter,
thing,
right? Going into park. Yeah, it's not just an electric thing. This one is weird too. So the shifter itself is like this little lever, which is fine, except that there's not a park gear per se. There's a button next to it that is traditionally the emergency parking brake or, the electronic parking brake. And that is what you push to put it into park. And it's kind of confusing and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then also, do you turn the car off and all that stuff? So yeah, there's a huge design change. Hopefully some of these things will be addressed in future iterations of this design. But yeah, there's a lot of quirks about this car.
John, something I noticed was that the tailgate is deceptively large compared to the actual opening, too. That was just something I noticed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I took it skiing with my daughter. So blue tarp, again, a rented vehicle. So blue tarp throughout to keep this.
If you're listening, BMW, we took care. We did the same thing with the tile.
Took care of it.
Yeah.
Took care of it. But yeah, it's a huge clamshell looking. Not a two-piece, not the drop down gate like on some X5s and such like that, but it just is a big door that opens, but it's a very much smaller space. For skis, not a problem. For tile, probably not a problem. Bring a TV home, not sure how that would fit. But the seats fold down flat. Plenty of room there. I found it a little odd with the folded seats. There was a warning in the instrument cluster that kept telling me that the seats weren't secured. And again, I will say, I had it for a couple of days. I wasn't going through the online and the paper manual. I didn't dig super deep. And some of it's because this warning pops up as you start driving that the seats aren't secured. And I couldn't figure out a way of canceling that out in the instrument cluster. So all the new controls on the steering wheel and around the column and on the center stack, definitely it's really new iDrive. It's
lack of controls.
Or lack of controls, yeah. or lack. The lights, for example, adjusting the cabin lighting or adjusting the dash lighting, it's a single button that brings up a new screen, a section of the infotainment system, on that screen, and that's where you adjust lights. The seats, you press a button on the door, and then seat controls come up. It's sleek and it's modern, but it's a little bit of just because we can. And I think we've said it, people have said in other podcasts, just because you can doesn't mean it should be in the screen. The screen has infinite number of selections, but that means there's an infinite number of selections to figure out how to adjust something. And
yeah, exactly.
That's the challenge.
There's buttons that you have to push to open a menu, like hard buttons that you push to open a menu on the screen because there are no other, buttons, but those don't do anything other than open a menu on the screen. And it's a little, frustrating in a way to have to do everything through the screen. And particularly of note is the adaptive cruise control. There is no button on the steering wheel to change the following distance. So if you're familiar with adaptive cruise control and you're behind a car, yours will automatically, speed up and brake depending on the car you're following and their speed. But BMW has made this decision to, you can read about it in the screen, but essentially it says it's going to automatically adapt your following distance based on where you're at and what you're doing. But I didn't find that the gaps that BMW decided to choose for me were necessarily comfortable. I like to be able to, make that change quickly on the steering wheel. If I see traffic coming up ahead, I want to give myself some distance, so that my car will start to, all of those things. And so it was a little obnoxious in a way and, intrusive to only have this automatic BMW chooses your following distance. Otherwise, you have to go into the menu and manually change it through the screen. It's just a little, like you said, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. Sometimes buttons are good.
I was going to say, much like the Keith talked about the stop starting, in that a lot of times I found with BMWs where you're trying to make sure it's locked because and such, and you end up double clicking the lock, which of course is the auto start. So then
we have a problem with BMWs. Yeah, always running in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Or even remember when they first came out with the electronic turn signals on the BMWs that you would turn it on and you would try to cancel it. You'd turn it on again. There's something about on or off, like this very basic thing that is just, they think of it differently than.
I want to say the driving experience of it, while not, again, like I mentioned earlier, not razor sharp, handling and ride is great. The ride it's got 21-inch wheels, so and it's a heavy vehicle, but it doesn't have that BMW shows you don't have to be stiff and uncomfortable to be an EV. And there's some manufacturers out there that really seem to not have a dampening and just you have this thumping of all imperfect surfaces. I liked the shifter, the gear selector, in that you could quickly engage battery mode for downhills or just following. That was nice, because when I started out on a 20-degree-ish morning, the 292-mile range quickly plummeted, and I ended up going 40-ish miles and using up almost 100 miles of range. And I was kind of worried, and I was using the battery as much as possible at battery mode. But when it warmed up after sitting in the sun, I gained back a lot of that range. So was there range anxiety? No, I knew I had plenty to get home, but it definitely was surprising at first to see it just the cold weather really affected that much. But one thing I want to ask Kelly, if you use the in-car navigation and how it addressed corners and such like that, because I found that a little disconcerting, what they did with the when you approach a turn, when you're driving with navigation from the native system and not something like Waze, for example.
It was like augmented, right?
Yeah, so it actually basically uses where your GPS location, and if your GPS says there's a curve coming up on the road, the highway or something that you're on, it'll start to slow down. And this is really becoming a market-wide trend. We're seeing this not just in BMW, we're seeing it in, the EV6 had this, and all cars are starting to get it. And it is jarring if you're not used to it. In some cars you can turn it off, in some cars you can't. And the performance of it varies, of course, across the market too, in terms of how much it slows down and how much in advance and everything. So yeah, it's becoming more prevalent. I think that as it becomes more and more prevalent, then I think it'll get fine-tuned a little bit to be less jarring as well.
I've got one last question before we move on from this vehicle for Kelly. I know BMW in the past hasn't done great in some of our advanced driving assistance surveys around the systems that can control steering and braking and acceleration. I actually really liked it. Has it actually gotten better, or have they improved this, or is this a new generation, or am I just...
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I think they've definitely improved almost every aspect of the system. And I would say the one that was the worst, or, our survey and members and everyone would comment on, would be the lane departure, aggressive steering, right? So if you're driving in a neighborhood, but you're going, above 25 or 35 miles per hour, and you want to steer to avoid a pedestrian or a mom and their child and their dog that's cyclist on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Anything. Yeah, exactly. And you go over that line. The BMW in the past did not want to let you do that. And so you'd almost in a way have to kind of white knuckle the steering wheel if you see that type of situation approaching, so that you don't run into them. And man, I played with the lane departure warning and the lane keeping because of that. And it has not only caught up to the pack, but I think it's now top of the pack for that specific feature. It is so pleasant. It doesn't have that resistance and, opposite steering that we experienced in the past. It's very much that it almost looks to the driver to see what the intent is. And if the driver is intentionally steering, kind of with a grip on it, then it doesn't fight you.
Again, this is a car, I doubt we're going to get the most expensive version, but we're definitely going to buy this vehicle, put it through testing, spend a lot more time with it, figure out what all those buttons do. I hope we get the one with the heated armrest, because it's real good for carpal tunnel, honestly. And if you want to learn more, head over to cr.org. We have pictures, we have a first drive, all kinds of information on this new vehicle, the BMW iX, which we rented from BMW to explore. Now, little break from us. We're going to you with your questions that you've sent to talkingcars@icloud.com. Here's a video question from Toronto. Here's Peter.
Hi. I just finished listening to your 2022 Top Picks episode and heard you referring to electric vehicles as being ecologically friendly. I believe you understand as well as anybody else that it's the electricity that is ecologically friendly, and not all electricity is made equal. Because in some places, a modern gasoline-powered vehicle actually is more ecologically friendly than some types of electricity. So keep your listeners informed. It's always good to have informed consumers, and let's give them that information as well.
All right, so this is a common question. Peter's not the only one to kind of say what he's saying here. And there is I've noticed a lot of kind of whataboutism with electric cars, saying, well, electric cars are so great, but what about this? Well, gas cars do this, but electric cars do this. And luckily, there is some actual hard data on this, at least for the United States. And Kelly, I believe you've done the research, so take it away.
I'll take credit for doing the research, but I actually asked our advocacy team in DC, and they gave me some numbers. So I will say them like I came up with them, but they're numbers. So what they told me is that on average, EVs generate far less emissions than gasoline cars. And on average, they are over 60% less emissions than the gasoline vehicles. And even on the dirtiest grids of electric, so in states like Kentucky, West Virginia, other states like that, an EV still is likely to reduce emissions by at least 20%. And you can go online and see all of these statistics for your individual state. But also just know that renewable energy is on the rise. And so the electricity is likely to get that much cleaner over time as we move away from the fossil fuels.
Yeah, I mean, we know EVs are not a panacea. They're still cars. They're still energy intensive to build. You still have to mine to get things. But even, there are a ton of studies out there that even show, not just the tailpipe emissions, but the cradle to grave, that an EV, it's less bad than the other options out there. It's kind of the least worst option. It's not riding a bicycle to work, but, one for a gas car, it's a better choice. So thanks for that question. If you're in the United States, you can go to afdc.energy.gov to the Alternative Fuels Data Center. So thank you so much for joining us and sending your questions to TalkingCars at iCloud.com. It's about all the time we have, but we'll talk cars again soon.